Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. There is this one rule that I have followed over the last 10 years to declutter my mind, my possessions and my relationships that turned me into this extreme kind of minimalist. Firstly, let me tell you that I don't consider myself to be a minimalist. I was trying to do something quite different when I was starting out. I actually don't know what minimalism is, or I don't follow the usual trends. I just call myself that because I have very few things, and I have the freedom to move around a lot, which I think is the point of minimalism. Is when I look it up online, I think these guys run a blog called minimalist.org. According to them, they say that it is about freedom and more space in around you and also inside your head. People who are usually the minimalist, they lose sight of the actual point of it, which is the freedom, the mental clarity, and the flexibility that comes with the sort of following this minimalist path. Oftentimes they get attached to the systems and the aesthetics. The process becomes more important than what it is intended for. It just happened that in pursuit of this sort of like to freeing up my time and freeing up my mind, minimalism was a byproduct of it. 10 years ago, I was thinking a lot. I was worrying too much about my relationships. The more friends I had, the more I had to sort of hold myself back. I'd also realized at this point that it's not the hardworking people that get rewarded. It's mostly the people who put up a show whenever the boss is around or around their partners. It's always the people who present themselves in a certain way. No one really cared about the truth or honesty. So that's the relationship aspect. And also all these things that I had accumulated over the last few years. It was giving all these responsibilities of taking care of these things, mostly expensive things. It was mainly limiting the freedom of movement, which I wanted to do back then because I wanted to travel a lot. I wanted to be in a position where I could just leave. Around this time, I picked up the book 4-Hour Workweek. Tim Ferriss talks about this. There's this whole section about elimination where he talks about the 80-20 rule. That's the single most valuable lesson that I took from that book. I did get other ideas, but this is the one I've been constantly applying to all aspects of my life. So this 80-20 rule is the Pareto's principle. Twist that a little bit, you can map that to your life as well. 80% of your worries or happiness come from the 20% of the things that you do or you don't do. In essence, keep the 20% of the things that contributes to the 80% quality of your lifestyle and eliminate the 80% of the things that only contributes to the 20% of the quality of your lifestyle. Firstly, the most important elimination of them all. Say no to wasted energy in relationships. It is easier to say no than saying yes and following through, whether it is a promise to ourselves or a promise to someone else. I said no to all those things, all those promises and standards that I forced upon myself because I was trying to either please someone else, it earned me respectability from others, or made me look good. This is saying no to myself. And also saying no to others. Saying no to others meant turning down invitations, not making unnecessary commitments or taking responsibilities for others, and also setting boundaries. It meant saying no to those people who talked about themselves, either to brag about themselves or as an emotional dumping ground. Especially family. Family is tricky, and also the so-called friends who you are friends with for a long time. Are they necessarily good for you? This is something that you have to ask. Mostly, they kept me around because they just like the free attention. So I cut out all those friends and romantic partners where you have to walk on eggshells around them or just plainly spending too much energy to maintain without getting too much in return. Say no to all those relationships, which will free you up from a lot of unnecessary responsibilities, spending time with people you don't like, and free up that time which you can use to actually connect with people who you may actually like. For the relationships that you want to keep, like family, you have to start setting boundaries for them to protect your mental space. Now, most people use this boundaries trick as a cheap trick to control others, especially if you have gone to a sensitivity seminar or assertiveness training. Boundaries are for yourself. You can't expect them to behave the way you want them to behave just because you set a boundary. It is about knowing when to walk away and knowing when to leave the room. And most of the times we don't. And we even convince ourselves that maybe it is our fault rather than see someone is taking advantage of you, especially when you have put yourself in an inferior position in their relationship. And we do this exactly the same thing to others in relationships where we feel superior to them. It took a lot of trial and error how to say these things. I lost a lot of friends because I suddenly turned into this asshole overnight, according to them. And there is some truth to it, because it's not their fault entirely, because I was lying to them just because I wanted them as friends, because I didn't want to feel alone. But it also got rid of some genuinely bad friendships. If you do have these genuinely bad relationships, the chances are you have certain relationships where you treat others the same way. In the book Courage to be Disliked by a Japanese author, I think, the author talks about building horizontal relationships rather than building vertical relationships to avoid this problem of like feeling inferior or superior. So when you drop the act of pretending to be someone else, it lets others know exactly what kind of person you are as well. And it also gives them an opportunity to decide whether to keep you around or not. Essentially, relationships need to be reciprocated. Some new agey people would say that this is the wrong approach. This would be mostly the people who are running this game on others, telling you that they need to be loved and accepted unconditionally. Who do you put your 80% of time and energy towards, but only get 20% in return? Don't make unnecessary commitments. Don't take unnecessary responsibilities for other people. Protect your own mental space. And in doing so, some people would tell you that you are afraid of commitment or something along those lines. Cut them loose too. Say no. Using these cues, you can actually get rid of 80% of your relationships and keep only the 20%. Let's talk about communication, saying no to over communication. Apply the 80-20 rule here as well. Now, I do have a problem with language. English is not my primary language, and so I use 20 words to convey something which could be easily conveyed in 10 words or less. Talk less. This is something that I constantly try to be aware of. I want to be succinct. That's a word, right? I used to talk a lot out of nervousness, out of the fear of boring the other person. So being succinct is a very good way, both in a professional and a personal setting. But don't be a good listener. That is another recipe for disaster. You would attract people who just want to talk about themselves. Sure, you can make a lot more relationships appealing to others' ego. I'm talking about actual relationships that will actually contribute to the quality of your life. And also, when it comes to work, turn down unnecessary meetings. Either automate or delegate the things that don't actually require your active participation. People usually think that having more choice means more freedom. In fact, we hate choices. We like to be told how to do things. We only hate it when we are told to do things by our family, or when it is coming from the people who you don't actually respect. Because we can easily read a book. We have no problem in being told what to do through a book. So we don't like actually to decide or make choices. We only want to know that if we wanted to, there is a possibility that we can. Having many choices also mean that you have to decide on that one thing, and that can often lead to analysis paralysis, weighing the pros and cons. I am one of those people who weighs the pros and cons on to mitigate risk, and I do that quite neurotically. So much energy is wasted in that process. So I asked myself, what are those decisions that I go over so frequently and waste a lot of time and energy on? What are those things? And I reduced the choices. Usually I'm left with one choice, so I could just go with that. And what are these 80% of the decisions that only actually matter 20%? In practice, this meant that eating the same meals every day, going to the same cafe, ordering the same breakfast, reduce your choices, eliminate the points of decision as much as you can to optimize that, which brings us to eliminating stuff, the things that you own. The more things that you have, the more you have to worry about. You have to take care of them, you have to make room for them. And also, especially if those things are expensive, then you're extra worried because they might get stolen, or you may drop it or break it. Don't buy things that adds problems to your life, which is one of the rules that I follow. accept this camera. It doesn't necessarily mean buying cheap things. It is about buying versatile things. Own a few versatile things that you can be used in different situations. Another trick is to limit the physical space. For example, for me in practice, that would look like carrying a carry-on bag. Everything that I own has to fit in that bag, including this tripod and camera and everything. And it has to weigh under a certain limit. Limit the physical space, whether it is your cupboard or the size of your dinner bowl. Alright, I have said a lot. And after all this elimination, the next step is to actually stay decluttered, mentally and physically. Though a worry-based approach, focusing on the problems and removing the cause of the problems, whether they are the things or relationships, that's a good start. The thing with worry is that you worry about the things where you imagine a negative outcome, but you're very happy to do the things where you imagine a positive outcome. It becomes very personal, which is the opposite of what we are trying to do here. For that mental clarity and freedom to be sustained, you have to go to the root of the problem and tackle it there. So you have to ask yourself, why do you create the clutter? Is it to soothe yourself because you're uncomfortable? Is it for that momentary satisfaction? Relationships wise, deal with the fear of being disliked. Deal with the fear of losing things. I would say if you have to pinpoint the source of the problem, the one thing is that the source of attachment. We value people and things either through money or the time spent worrying about, thinking about, and the mental energy put into them. How much are we invested in them, in acquiring them? We are afraid of losing those things. The evaluation mechanism is all wrong. So in a sense, your alarm bell should go off whenever you think about one person way too much, or think about one thing that you want to buy way too much, because there's a lot of build up to it. And once you acquire it, when you lose it, it shatters your whole world, and you don't want that to happen. So you hold on to things and relationships, which is quite bad for you. And hopefully you would take this one single rule, the 80-20 rule, and apply it to all aspects of your life. It's an easy way to do this elimination process. Right, I have talked forever. Subscribe and like the video and leave your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.